Good afternoon. Well, I'm going to talk to you today about a group of objects that we found on a development site here at the corner of Kevin Street and New Street last year. The site is the old Myra Glass factory. I don't know if any of you know it. The site was intensively occupied in the medieval period. You see, it does lie quite a bit outside the medieval town, but when Edward the Bruce approached the town in 1317, they burnt the suburbs, which including our site here. And by the 17th century, you see, it's open ground, it's basically fields, and it's fields, and at this end, it's a dried out mill pond. And the area of the dried out mill pond was used for the disposal of rubbish. There was a whole lot of rubbish pits, and in two of the pits, here and here, the pink ones here, we found a whole group of objects. As you can see, there's a stack of semi-complete pots all pasted in one inside each other. There's bits of glass everywhere, including little complete glass vessels. Lots of these funny little wooden discs, other little wooden strips, bits of planks, bits of yellow things, all sorts of stuff. But the dead giveaway about what we were dealing with is these shards here. These are shards of a drug jar or albarello. And this is therefore a medical assemblage. Now it turns out that this is the partial contents of an apothecary's shop and workshop dating from sometime between the 1640s and 1660s. It's the most complete and material we have from any apothecaries anywhere in Europe, anytime. So this material is extremely significant, and it's interesting as well. Now I'm going to give you a quick run through of the types of objects to show you what we found, and then I'll say something about the significance of this material. We had all these little wooden discs. I think there's 45 or something of them. They're all pine. They're about 2 millimeters thick. They come in 6 sizes from about 3.5 up to 5 inches in diameter. And we had a little oval one. And then we had these little pine strips. A couple of them had nails in them. Now, we didn't know what the heck these were. These were very, very odd. Until we found this one. And we can see that the strips actually did belong with this. And Cathy Moore, who did all the wood analysis for us, has suggested even traces of glue around these. And these are little benchwood boxes, like we see here in Dutch paintings. And the odd thing about these is they don't seem to survive in the archaeological record in Britain or Ireland. But if we look at contemporary pictures of apothecary shops, look what we see. Mounds and mounds of these little wooden boxes of various different sizes. They don't even seem to survive in Europe. We can't find any examples associated with apothecaries in Europe either, which is rather strange. There are loads and loads of references to these, though, in the literature in the 17th century, because wooden vessels like these, wooden boxes, were the choice for storing herbs and spices, because they kept the flavours much better than they would if they were stored in glass or pottery. A whole lot of other wooden vessels, little small staves built like little barrels. This one's only about 4 inches high. This is a complete one about 6 inches. Large, full-size barrels, various other wooden objects. This is a tally stick. This is one half of a stick which was used it was like a receipt for a debt. The apothecary would have taken once the stick, written numbers or X's on the side to indicate the debt that was owed to him, split it, handed one half to his debtor, and when the debtor came back and paid, they'd match the 2 sticks up and then dispose of them. So obviously he didn't get paid. We also have some pieces of what appear to be petrified wood. We can't identify the species. This one here, you can see it's got a sort of series of chunks that's being dug out of it. And there are frequent references, again, to apothecaries using petrified wood because it's full of minerals, interesting sort of minerals. And we have these little curls of birch bark. And again, birch bark was an analgesic. It was used to cure headaches. Even today, it's still used to cure headaches. We have also got residues and things in some of the little bottles and vessels, but they're organic, and unfortunately, this material was dumped in the cesspit, which is full of organic material. So Professor Helen Sheridan in Trinity College is trying to work her way through to see if we can actually identify any of the organic compounds that are in this material, but it is rather difficult. These are the albarellos, or jug jars. These are dry jug jars. They don't have spouts, so they were used to hold dry drugs. You can see they're different heights and widths, but they all essentially the same form, and they all have this very pronounced rim. And this is because they didn't actually have a pottery top. They would have had a cloth, paper, even leather stretched over it and tied around the side. These are what people call Anglo-Dutch, because we can't always tell whether they're made in England or made in Holland. We don't know. But these are a sure sign of an apothecary. Then we have these little salve pots. As you can see, these are only teeny little things. These are extremely crude. This is a bit better. It's more like the actual jug jars. They come in a wide variety of forms. These are all Dutch. This one here, as well as having a yellow stuff inside it, has a date, 1639 scratched on it. And this was made when the pot was still wet, so the potter, for some reason, we don't know why, scratched the date on it. But of course, this is incredibly helpful to us. I mean, wouldn't it be lovely if every pot you found had a date on it? So we know our material now can't have been deposited any earlier than 1639. I mean, in fact, after we found that, every time people were picking up pottery, there was no date, I would throw it away. And then we have another group, again, all Dutch pottery. This is what I sort of refer to as the working pottery. This is the stuff, the vessels the apothecaries use for boiling and cooking and cooling and making up his various concoctions. We have, I think there's about half a dozen of these lads, two-handled, three-footed cauldrons. They're all sooted on the outside. They'll all be used to boil up something. This one here is slightly different. You see the way the rim comes in much further in. This is unusual for a cooking pot or anything like this. I suspect this may have been used for distilling. This one you can see is a much deeper one. It's not sooted and it appears to be a large mixing bowl. We have smaller mixing bowls. This one used coal, this one heated. And then we have these really unusual flat pans. Again, they both appear to be three-footed. This one has a handle. I should have put in, we did find the rest of that eventually, but it doesn't have a handle. This one is extremely odd. We could find no parallels for it anywhere in terms of pottery that's been found on post-medieval sites. This, I think, takes the biscuit, though, as the pot from the pottery assemblies. This is Dutch, again. Huge thing. It's about 620 millimeters across, about more than 2 foot across. Again, it had 3 feet, but significantly, it had 3 handles. Now, this is your typical domestic colander to the same scale. You see, it's something quite different. Also, this one has 2 handles. This one here is also almost flat. In a way, it's more akin to something like this. This is a 17th century Italian gunpowder factory. And we see a guy with a sieve suspended on 3 strings, basically. So this is probably what this was used for. Now, this has never shown up like this. There's no other object anywhere in Europe that looks anything like this. Nobody's ever found anything. And we found another one. Here you see a shard, just a single shard of another one. Much slightly different, much neater holes. Again, another just now Dutch bowl there threw in because there was a nice picture there with it. But again, all this stuff is Dutch. We then have some sort of locally made crude pottery, a couple of rough jugs, 2 very large mixing bowls. This has got some sort of stuff stuck on the inside of which we haven't yet been able to identify. Our apothecary also had some much more fancy pottery. He used this lovely borderware, English borderware porringer. These often turn up in apothecary shops. They're like little soup bowls. They were probably for giving out a nice hot broth or a porridge or something like that. We have an early Staffordshire tankard. We have this fine, big metropolitan slipware bowl decorated with starfish. We have some German stonewares, this really nice Westerwald. The decoration on this is absolutely superb. The fineness of the stamps is incredible. All this is early 17th, mid-17th century. This fabulous big Bartman. Again, he's over 2 feet tall. Beautiful bearded face and big armorials. Produced around Frecken, around in the Cologne area. We have the face of another one. We have the neck of another one without a face, and then we have his little baby brother. This is a really little cutesy. He's only this size. Really lovely. Loaded tin glazed earthenware coming in from Britain, coming in from Holland, coming in from Italy, and possibly even Portugal as well. Whole range of it. A lot of it very bitty. Unfortunately, the largest bits we have are all Dutch. And very often what happens with the Dutch tin glazed earthenwares is they react badly with the cess, with any sort of organic material, and the glaze goes completely black. It's impossible to see the decoration. This is about the best one you can see. But you can see that one shard there, which is higher up in the pit. It gives you some idea of the original colour. Now this one is interesting too because if you look at the decoration, it's got these series of panels with these like ropey designs. And these are an imitation of Chinese porcelain, just like this one here that we found as well. This is actual Chinese. You see, little panels with a ropey designs. Now at the time we're talking about the mid-17th century. China and Japan, which hadn't really been discovered yet, made porcelain. And they closely kept that secret of how to make it very, very close. It was only in the early 18th century at Meissen that the Europeans discovered how to make porcelain. And porcelain imports coming in from China are extremely expensive, extremely rare. So you get a lot of industry where they're producing this cruder tin glazed pottery, and they slap a white lead glaze on it and then paint it in blue and white in imitation of Chinese. These are slightly better fake Chinese forgeries, basically. They were selling it off as Chinese ware. But this is a crackware bowl that we found. Now, it's called crackware because it came in on Portuguese carracks, usually into Holland. This is Ming. It was produced between about 1575 and 1650, the last 3/4 of a century of the Ming dynasty. It was extremely prized, extremely expensive. And for our guy to have it meant he had a certain wealth and status. And then we have the glass. I think one of the most important things we have in this assemblage, all of it's important, but the glass is really important. This is about half of it laid out here in Susanna Kelly's conservation lab. Massive amount of glass. There's roughly about 60 vessels at least, and you can imagine trying to put them all together. And Susanna has done an incredible job. You can imagine this is 60 jigsaws with no pictures of what they were. A lot of them are completely clear. A very small amount of it here might be Irish. It's a cruder green glass, and we do have some window glass that looks like Irish. It has been analysed up in IT Sligo, but the results aren't terribly conclusive. This is manganese glass, which is definitely not Irish, because at that period you don't get manganese being used in glass. And then the rest, I suspect, most of it that we can identify where it comes from, it's imported from Holland, or some of it from Britain. I doubt any of that is Irish. The Irish glass industry really only takes off at the very end of the 17th century, and then they're starting to produce really fine wares. Before that, we don't have any evidence of them producing stuff like this. I mean, a lot of these vessels have walls only about a millimetre or 2 millimetres thick. It's incredibly well-made material. And just to take you through a range of the objects, we have these case bottles. I think there's about a dozen of them. They're called case bottles because they're square and they originally would have sat in a case. This is an 18th century one, just to show you. Again, they're very, very thin, and you can see these are all Susanna Kelly's jigsaws. This one was a bit thicker, so it was actually in one piece. But you see they come in two forms: narrow neck of various lengths and a low, wide neck. These may well have been used for alcohols or any solvent, any volatile sort of liquids with the narrow spout. These for just general purpose. They turn up, they're not common, but they do turn up in various houses and different places. They're not uncommon. We have a range of other little bottles. These are only about 4 inches in height. This might be English. These are all certainly Dutch. These would have been used maybe for perfumes, essential oils, things like that. We have a whole clatter of these jars. I'm not sure, there's dozens of them. Unfortunately, we have the tops, we have the bottoms, and we have a big mass of bits in the middle, but we cannot stick we haven't been able to manage to stick one bottom onto one top at all. However, these do turn up in places. You can see the terrible photograph that I robbed from, I think it was Chris Corlett, of these from a site in Poland. They're well known. They're well enough known. You see there's a very distinctive rounded edge, very flared rim. Again, these would have probably had little cloth, paper, even paper tops on them. They would have either been used for storage or as a salve pot to hand out. And then I think these are my favourite. These are cutesies. And this guy's only he's less than 1.5 inches tall. He's about just over 2 inches. You get some idea of the scale of them when you see them holding in your hand. These are absolutely gorgeous. We do see 17th century illustrations of them. There's a few from England, but quite a lot of them on the continent. They're common enough. I'm not sure if we have any from Ireland. We may, but I haven't found any yet. Again, the two forms, little onion bottles, and then square ones. And again, probably closed with a cloth cap or something like that. I mean, this one would hold about half a teaspoon of liquid. That's all. These are teeny. So these would have been used for giving out precious things like mercury, laudanum, something like that. A precious liquid. And then we have these. And these are very, very unusual. We have a series of them, as you can see, graduating in size. We presume there's some sort of little measures. We've tried to estimate the capacity of each one, and they don't seem to go up in any sort of logical order. We don't know. The only problem is we can't find them anywhere. We have not. There's a couple of bits of rims from England that might look like that, but we don't have a single object like that from anywhere in Europe. The only one we've managed to find is this here, which is 18th century. This is a group of 18th century glass that was sold in Sotheby's. And we've something slightly like them, slightly different, but not far off it. There is a possible 17th century drawing of one here. God knows what that is, actually, it might be one of them. There are scratch marks in them, whether that's from, they were actually maybe used for mixing, or it could have been just for cleaning, so we're not sure. But again, as I say, it's rather odd in the 17th century to be finding stuff that has never turned up anywhere before. It's a strange situation. And then the stars in the glass field are cucurbits. These basically are the bottom parts of stills for distilling. Rose water, all sorts of different things were distilled. You can see I have a flask-shaped one and a gourd-shaped one. And there's fragments of an even larger gourd-shaped one, but it's only bits. You can see them here, plenty of illustrations show the different types of objects. The still in those days, a still consisted of a cucurbit, the actual alembic or condenser, and the receiver. So you boiled your liquid here, the steam got condensed here, you've got your concentrate dropping down in here. The only bit of the actual alembic we have is this possible piece. We can't be definitely sure it is. It's a long tube. It may be part of this here. As far as I know, we don't have any distillation equipment like this from this date in Ireland. There is a few bits from England, and there is some from the continent. And then we have, I think, 12 or 13 drinking vessels. This one is English, Dutch, we're not sure. All the rest are Dutch. This one is wine glass. The stem is broken off. It's been decorated with a bit of gilding. This I thought initially was Venetian, but apparently it's actually Dutch, but it's made by Venetians in Holland. So and these are all Dutch. This one's got a decoration of gold and little droplets, and then we have a couple of these as well, decorated with these little nipples of glass. These are, actually I'll show you a picture of one of these in a minute. These are common enough. But again, Dutch, they're all Dutch. Then I mentioned the little pot here with the date on it. Now it had a yellow gunk inside it, and we found these 4 oyster shells with the yellow gunk. And the yellow gunk turns out to be arsenic sulfide, which is a poison. It also can be used as a medicine, but it also can be used as a pigment in painting. Now, when we were doing this stuff, my daughter Robin was over in London, in University College London, doing her finals in an art history degree, and I was sending over pictures going, Robin, look at this, how wonderful is this? And she would, oh yeah, Dad, another pot, another one. When I sent her the picture of this, she got very excited. And she came back and said, Dad, look at Nicholas Hilliard, look at Edward Norgate. And I said, what are you talking about? She sent me over PDFs. Hilliard and Norgate are two of the main sort of English miniature painters from the late 16th into the 17th century. Both of them have written treatises on limning, which is miniature painting. And in them, both of them make frequent references to the use of a great mother of pearl shell, or oyster shells, or mussel shells for mixing their paint, storing their paint. And Robin even found this lovely portrait of Simon Benning or Bennick, miniaturist, and you can see on his little shelf, here's his mussel shell with his paint in it. Now the thing about these is that they don't survive in art historical terms. You don't get these from artists' studios. You certainly don't get them anywhere else. So these may well be completely unique. And the nice thing to do is that this photograph here is now being used in the art history department in UCL in their lectures. So it's kind of sexy. Now, of course, the reason the apothecaries or our limners here wanted the shells is firstly they're cheap, but secondly it's cleanliness. Hilliard starts off telling in his treatise here, it's lovely, he says, only a gentleman can be a miniature painter. And you think, oh God, he's a snob. But then he explains, no, because to avoid dust and dirt, you have to wear the finest of silks. So only a gentleman can be. And you see here, he's wearing a silk. And this obsession with cleanliness that miniature painters had by necessity is probably part of the reason why our apothecary had these shells as well. They're cheap, but they're clean. In the 17th century, medicine had to be pure. Any impurities, anything that got into the medicine when you were making it would wreck its efficacy. So we get this sort of referred to in a bleak way from William Bullen. I think it's 21 or something rules for apothecaries. But the apothecaries have two places in his shop. One most clean for the physic. The physic is the medicine. There they are mixing up the medicine. And a second baser place for the surgery stuff. It's like a comedic picture here. But again, this is because they didn't understand bacteria. So it didn't matter if they sewed you up in filth, but the medicine they were going to give you would have been made in a clean environment. We had some clay pipes. Again, tobacco comes in about 1580s. We're 60 years later. It was still regarded as a medicine in some cases, but we don't know with this whether these were actually being sold as medicine with tobacco in them, or whether they were just being puffed on by the apothecary and his apprentices. The great thing about clay pipes, though, is we can date them closely. And these bowls are a form that dates between about 1640 and 1660, which ties in with everything else we had. We had very few metal objects. These are about the only metal objects that the apothecary would have used. These are little bronze spatula. They're only teeny little things. So it does look like somebody has gone through this material before we got to it. Somebody has, or even before it got into the pit here. They've pulled out all the spoons, the knives, the mortars, the big metal mortars, the weights, the weighing scales, anything that had a monetary value. It clearly was taken out before it was thrown away. The only sort of main metal objects we found are little lead window cames. These are from little windows with little diamond-shaped panes. You see some of the glass is still in it. As well as these, there were planks, broken planks, bits of wall plaster, stuff like that. So it looks very like something happened to the apothecary's shop. We're getting bits of the collapsed building mixed in with some of the objects here. And this, to some extent, also leads on to another very important thing about this assemblage, is that was all thrown in at one time. You can see the way all the pots are all stacked up, and the rest of these pots were found together. So it was all being thrown into the pit at one time, which is very unusual. The other very unusual thing about this is that, as we've seen, we've no chamber pots, we've no domestic cooking pots, we don't have domestic wares. This is purely the stuff that came from the apothecaries. There's nothing else mixed into it. This makes it extremely unusual. Well, for the first time we have an actual assemblage in Europe that is just apothecaries material all together and all dumped at the one time. We will look at other apothecaries material that's come up. These are from London. Again, very often just a couple of drug jars, maybe the odd salve pot, little porringer. These are from Jamestown Fort in the States. Best assemblage, I suppose, is on a site here in Colchester, Lion Walk in Colchester. There's something like 80 of these drug jars. Now, they have the wet drug jars that we don't have, and they have little salve pots. There's over 80 of these altogether. The only problem is that they were found in a series of pits down here. There's an apothecary shop up here. They were found, unfortunately, mixed in with a vast quantity of pottery that came from various houses and probably even the tavern here as well. So even though we have all this apothecaries material, there's such a vast mix of stuff, it's very hard to pick out, apart from these, what else the apothecary might have come from the apothecaries. We certainly have our Dutch mixing bowl and a Dutch cauldron like we have. But again, huge amount of domestic stuff. And there's no glass, I think there's 2 bits of glass, no wood, no anything else. Moving into the 18th century, we start to see probably a few more examples of apothecaries material turns up. But at this stage, from the late 17th century, the sort of material culture that the apothecary used changes. It's gone our lovely little files, and we get these simple cylindrical medicine files which last right up to the 20th century. These are a set of 18th century mixing pots, or measures, that we found in Mercer's Hospital a few years ago, probably the equivalent to what we had in glass. This then is a collection from a druggist in London. Druggists were basically like a modern chemist. They didn't do all the experiment and working and mixing and boiling up that the apothecaries did. They do just so with the drugs. And we can see we have a little cylindrical medicine files and salve pots. Apothecaries material does show up in other contexts. This is a fantastic hoard from Amsterdam. It was found at the back of a very wealthy merchant's house. We know the merchant, know who he was when he lived there. Wonderful collection of stuff, crackware plates, crackware porcelain. We have our domestic cooking ware, chamber pots, teapots, wine bottles, a whole lot of domestic stuff. But in amongst it, look at these, the whole clatter of little glass files, medicine files, and little salve pots. What we're seeing here, of course, is the other end of the apothecary's trade. This is the stuff that's the apothecary is given to people. They're bringing it home, using it, throwing it away out in the back garden. And when you look at the amount of medicine these guys were consuming, they were either completely unhealthy or a family of hypochondriacs, I would say. And then distillation apparatus. Pottery and glass distillation equipment turns up on quite a few sites in Britain and throughout the continent. Very, very seldom, though, in apothecary shops or to do with apothecaries. You find them in abbeys and friaries, in the kitchens of large houses and castles. We even find them in some pottery workshops where they're distilling materials to use in their glaze. Another place, of course, you find them is in alchemist workshops. There's about a dozen well-known alchemist workshops that have been excavated in Europe. This is part of a huge hoard of material from one in Oberstockstall in Austria. We see we have pottery and glass distilling vessels. One thing that marks out all these alchemists, though, is these crucibles and evidence of metalworking. Our guy, we have no evidence of any dabbling in metalworking, so we can straight away probably say he's definitely not an alchemist. Across Europe as well, of course, there's loads of historical pharmacies that have been there since the medieval period and onwards. Some of them, this one in Poland, again, this is the one I pinched off Chris, I think it was, have some early stuff, but then mixed in. Generally, what they contain is odds and ends thrown in from all different periods. Usually, most of the stuff is 19th century, the odd bit of early stuff, but nothing in terms of complete assemblage. We have medical collections, the Wellcome Trust, or the Wellcome Foundation. The various colleges, surgeons, physicians in different parts of the world have them. But again, their collections are either late, or when they have the early stuff, they go for the hoochie, spectacular stuff. They don't have the ordinary old stuff like we have. I showed you some illustrations of some of the distillation apparatus. You do see that in some medical texts from the 17th century. There's a vast amount of medieval texts from the 17th century. But they don't really show the early stuff we have, the types of ordinary pots and glass that we have. They tend to concentrate really on the herbs and the different chemicals and things that have been used. There are a huge number of wills from apothecaries or inventories of apothecary shops. And some of these are very, very useful. There's one I remember from Wales in particular, because it lists the titles of the eight books that the actual apothecary had. Unfortunately, when it comes to looking at the stuff we had, you get references like 6 physic bottles or a dozen assorted pots, which tells us absolutely nothing about what they were looked like. So we have somewhat to extent come up against a dead end in trying to find a parallel for our assemblage and trying to see how complete it is or what's missing or how typical would it be of the period. And I thought again, well, what else could we look at? And I thought of my daughter Robin in London, and I said, well, she'd been doing her 2 main sort of themes or whatever she'd been doing in her final year was on 16th and 17th century English art and Dutch genre painting of the 16th and 17th century. So I said, great, I'd glom to Robin. So I contacted her and said, any chance you could find a painting or drawings or anything like that? And she came back pretty quick and she said, well, Dad, you're not going to have much luck in England. It's all painting in England in the 17th century. It's all portraiture, it's great heroic scenes, it's heraldry. There's nothing really, very few pictures of everyday people, paintings of everyday people doing everyday things. This is one rare one, but this is late 16th century, but it's from a book. Wonderful, fantastic scene of a surgery lesson. There are, of course, in loads of books and pamphlets, you get woodcuts, etchings, that sort of thing, showing apothecaries, alchemists, that sort of carry on. They show some objects, but again, the accuracy and the detail in these is pretty awful. However, we are in luck in that on the continent, In the area that's now the Netherlands, what was then the United Provinces, there was a tradition going way back into the 16th century of what art historians call genre painting. That is really anything that's not history, portraiture, heroic scenes. It's things like still lives, things like views of cities, pictures of everyday people doing everyday things. Think of Bruegel's Hunters in the Snow, that sort of carry on. And in amongst those, there are a large number of pictures of medical guys going about their business. These are just a small selection of hundreds that we've come across. They're by a huge range of artists, most of them with unpronounceable Dutch names, but even Rembrandt and Vermeer get in on the art as well. Now, Robin sent me these, but she sent a huge health warning in capital red letters on the front of the file when she sent these over. Dutch art in the 17th century is pretty complicated. These are all painted in sort of studio systems. They're banging out paintings, they're cheap, they're knocking them out, they're copying and banging them out. So an awful lot of what we see in here is fiction. The backgrounds could be completely imaginary, or they might be copied of a picture relating to something completely different. They're also very stylized in the way, look, our alchemist here is reading his book with the light shining in the window, illuminating him. They're always shown with books coming about. There's a whole lot of symbolism. Some of them then, like this one, are sort of poking fun at them. So they're all done for, there's a whole lot of stuff going on in these paintings. We also know that Dutch artists made a huge use of sketchbooks and pattern books and things like that. One sketch would be used again and again. We have 4 paintings from David Tenier the Younger, his studio, and we see, look at this pot here. What about that one there? Where is he? There he is again. There he is again. It's the same sketch used over and over again. I mean, there's some Dutch still lives of flowers, showed bunches of flowers, and some of the flowers would never have been bloomed together. They bloom 9 months apart. So there's a lot of fakery going on here. You can also see the way these objects are arranged. That's a still life. No apothecary has a lovely sort of arrangement of that. So all these are very, very stylized, and we have to be very careful with them. However, there is some positives in this. These David Tenier, his studio produced mountains of these, but he also did loads and loads of kitchen scenes and domestic scenes. So we went through the kitchen and domestic scenes, looking at the groups of objects shown in the same way. And there's virtually no tie-over between the objects and pottery here. I think there's one type of pot we found that is common to both. So these, technically then, in the Dutch mind, these aren't domestic pots. We've also got to remember that a lot of these paintings were actually done for apothecaries, alchemists themselves, or for people who were very familiar with apothecaries and alchemists. So we should expect some sort of degree of truth in some of these things. So with that in mind, we sort of gathered together our objects and started hunting through these pictures to see what we come up with. Now, of course, the little wooden boxes, both round and oval, they come up everywhere. The glass phials, there's one there, slightly bigger glass bottles. The case bottles, and you notice the way here, tall and narrow, wide and flat, tall and narrow, wide and flat, same case bottles. They're common enough. Yeah, there are various alembics and cucurbits, they're turning up as well. One thing we haven't been able to find in any of these paintings is our little glass measures. The thing is, it's interesting in my mind, it's almost negative evidence that you don't find them anywhere archaeologically, and they don't turn up in the paintings either. It's a sort of a negative evidence, I suppose, in a funny sort of way. Then if we look at the pottery, or a big mixing bowl, here we go, that's it, spit for this one. Now these do turn up in domestics. We see these in domestic scenes. They're the one type of pottery we do. These two-handled cauldrons, we don't see in domestic pottery. They tend to be single-handled, more like a modern saucepan. But again, we see them here. They are there. There's more there. I mean, these are just a few I've pulled out. Our flat pan. Again, one with the handle like that you might see in a domestic scene. These ones without handles you won't. There's another one there without a handle, another one there without a handle. And look at this one. I mean, that could almost be a painting of ours. It's exactly the same colour and profile. It's incredible. And the one, our lovely big sieve that we can't find anywhere, nobody's ever seen before. Look what we see hanging up the back wall of a couple of these paintings. Now, we can't say for definite it's the same thing, but to my mind, that looks pretty close to what that is. We even have a little mussel shell used for mixing. So there's a lot of commonality. we've got to remember these are not paintings of individual apothecaries, these are stylized paintings. So, but the stuff that a Dutch person or Dutch artist would have suspected or suggested or is in an apothecary's shop, it's exactly the same stuff we have. I've mentioned before that all the metal objects are missing. One of the other things that was missing, or we hoped we might find, was one of these. Some sort of stuffed dragon lizards or something like that. And we found some weird little bones that we thought were weird little bones in amongst the cess that this stuff was thrown in. So we sent them off to Nora Birmingham to get her to look at them, but Nora was boring, and Nora came back, just cats and dogs, nothing unusual. We were hoping for a drag, but we didn't get one. But of course, the most obvious thing that we're missing from this material is the actual apothecary himself. And trying to hunt down who our apothecary might be presents us with a number of challenges. Now, lucky enough, when we were digging this stuff, I came across reference to a project in Exeter University looking at the modern history of medicine. And in that, it mentioned Dr. John Cunningham in Queen's University in Belfast, who's doing the Irish side of it. So I contacted Dr. Cunningham, and he very generously has helped us out with a lot of historical material, which really does help us. We're looking at a potted history of apothecaries. We can see that they really start to be mentioned in Britain in the late 12th century, and really they're in a whole lot of different guilds right the way through, up until you get the Worshipful Company of Apothecaries, which was founded in London in 1617. And this is to regulate apothecaries in London. This only literally applies to the square mile of London, nowhere outside it. In Dublin at this stage, we find apothecaries in all sort of different guilds. Apothecaries, because of the way they, as we shall see, they traded in raisins and plums and dams and all sorts of things. It wasn't just in medicines. Some of them might be tallow makers, some of them anything else. They tend to be not in any particular guild. In Dublin, we get them in the Guild of St. Mary Magdalene with physicians, barber surgeons, wig makers, but a whole lot of other guys. We also find them in merchants' guilds. And sometimes we find a reference to a merchant. And when you hunt him down, you find a bill, you find it's all for medicine. So he's actually, as a merchant, he's actually an apothecary. So it's not easy finding these guys in Dublin. And of course, so many of our records have gone up in smoke. And it really is only in 1745, which is, 100 years after us, that we get the Guild of St. Luke, which is just for apothecaries, and then the Apothecary in the late 18th century. So hunting down our guy is not easy, or who he might be. Now this is just a very preliminary map I did a while ago. Taking the information that I got from Dr. Cunningham and from other sources, I've tried to mark up the apothecaries we know where they were, where they existed in Dublin. We know of loads more apothecaries, but we don't always know where they worked or where they lived. And there are more you can probably, and we will add to this. You see most of them cluster around the medieval town, which is probably what you'd expect. But look, there's one guy down here. There's our site. And this guy is one Jacob, or James Rickman, who's described as an apothecary and perfumer. He's a native of Lower Germany, which means he's Dutch. Now we know he settled in Dublin by at least 1634. He may have been here by 1600, we don't honestly know. But in 1641, his premises are recorded as being in St. Kevin's parish. Now if we look at maps, this is Speed's map before, Gom's map after the date of our assemblage, we see St. Kevin's parish. The only area with actual development is Kevin Street here itself, and then later on, Kevin Street and Butter Lane, that's today's Bishop Street. So it's clearly, if our apothecary is going to be in Kevin's parish, it's going to be in this area, which is very close to our site. In this, as you can see the way this is developing throughout the 17th century, you see all these extra streets. In this area, in the 17th century, in the early part of the 17th century, we find a whole lot of references to other Dutch merchants and other Dutch people moving into this area. It's almost like a little Amsterdam in a way. So in a way, for our Dutch apothecary to be here is not a surprise. We also have a list of the medicine that Jacob Rickman gave to Matteo de Renzi in 1634. And you can see here why sometimes they get called merchants. Almonds, raisins, what are they else? They've got prunes, cinnamon, nutmegs. I mean, hardly what you think is medicinal sort of stuff. But they're selling a whole wide range of stuff. And then Dr. Cunningham has found one other reference to Jacob Rickman, which is actually quite interesting, is that a guy called Dr. Adrian Huyberts wrote a pamphlet in 1675, and at the end of his argument he gives us a little autobiography of himself, and he says he studied medicine in Trinity, and then afterwards he spent 7 years as Rickman's apprentice. 7 years was the standard length of any apprenticeship. And he described Jacob Rickman as the ablest apothecary in the city. So we know quite a relatively little, but relatively much about Rickman. Now, in Rickman we have an apothecary in the right place at the right time. But there's one other thing, of course, about him, and that is he's Dutch. And as we've seen, well, we have so much of our material is Dutch. Now, the drug jars and these large plates and bowls are always going to be Dutch anyway. The fancy glass is probably going to be Dutch because we couldn't produce it here at this time. However, look at this. This is all Dutch. This is all a very simple, especially these, terribly simple type of pottery. Any Dublin potter could have made this material. And the fact that all this was all imported from Holland does rather suggest that our guy could be Dutch, and if he was, that he could well be Jacob Rickman. Okay, that's it.